Welcome to another edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Professors Burgess and Bussey here, handing out degrees again in common sense. Sadly, this has become a superpower. Bubba, the border. How many times on the show, the main show during the week, have we spoke of what we think is just the simplicity of you cannot have an unsecure border?
If you have no border, you have no nation. It just makes common sense to us, and it is a big campaign issue here in the election. We heard it prominently mentioned in the debate the other night. And, you know, the problem is everybody's saying this, saying that. Yeah. We got to go and find out what the truth is, and I think to do that, Rick, we have to go to the proverbial horse's mouth.
Yes, that brings us to Chris Clem. He is our guest today, former U.S. Border Patrol Chief, 27 and a half years of experience. He's now retired, but he's trying to use his voice, and we're thankful for that, to alert the public of the dangers of an open U.S.-Mexico border. You've probably heard and seen him on other outlets, but today his debut on Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. I am very appreciative to be able to talk about this topic. It is important and it's vital to our nation. And as Bubba was mentioned, it's every country deserves to have a secure border, and anything less than that is a betrayal from our government.
Yeah. So help us with this. Let's jump right in. You know this firsthand, and this seems logical, but talking to the public, watching what's going on in our country, apparently not. There's a lot of propaganda around this. When you say as clear as you can, it's just logical that people should not flood into your country unvetted. We have legal immigration, and if we need to work on that to make that system better, I'm all about that. But not vetting people and letting them come into the border of your country.
Invade your country, Rick.
How does anyone think that's okay? And then you hear the propaganda. The people say, well, why would we deny access to our country to other people? And you are making it crystal clear. If only that were the topic, we could agree on that, but that's not why you need a secure border. It's not about denying people access to the country who are looking for a better life. It's because it's not safe.
Correct. So border security is national security. It's public safety. It's all that comes into play when it's about protecting America. It's about protecting American citizens, those that are here within our borders. It's the right thing to do. I will tell you this. I can't take 100% credit for this because it actually belongs to the late, great Senator Fred Thompson from Tennessee. He mentioned tall fences and wide gates back in a 2008 Republican primary when it came down to border and immigration topic. 2008, 16 years ago. And it resonated with me and throughout my career, and now that I've retired, it is a good metaphor for the tall fences represents the border security apparatus, what we need to keep our country safe, to keep our agents safe, to do their job, to protect the communities along the border, to avoid exploitation by the smugglers. And the wide gates are the lawful pathways, the right way to come in through our ports of entry for legal trade and travel, tourism, and really to allow the system to work and protect those that are being persecuted and tortured so they can come in the right way. Without that secure border, without that tall fence, if you will, we are opening it up for chaos. And that's what's happened. That's what we've seen display over the last 3.5 years, because I retired a little over 19 months ago. I had 27 and a half years as a Border Patrol agent. I was the chief patrol agent in Yuma, which was ground zero for the better part of 2021 and 22 on the border security crisis. And it was purposeful, and it was done by this administration. They stopped what was decades of progress and really execution and implementation of the Border Patrol agents plan, not President Trump's plan. He just had the willingness to get it done. And we had one of the most secure borders I had in my career. At that point would have been 25 years. And I watched it just come to a screeching halt. And now we're seeing this chaos and this crime wave and the tragedies play throughout the country. What was a border community problem is now an American problem. It's playing out every day.
Chris, tell us this. How many people are coming over the border? What's our best estimate on this? And how many have come over in the last 3.5 years, do you think?
Well, I can tell you that there are a lot of different numbers, and it's a really difficult way to track it. But I can tell you that have been caught by Border Patrol over the last 3.5 years is just over 10 million people have entered this country illegally and apprehended by Border Patrol. On top of that is about 2 million gotaways, documented people that we've seen or saw their footprints that we chased them and they got away. That's close to 2 million there. So that's roughly 12 million that have come in illegally between the ports of entry, not the ones that we can talk about that are being allowed in that are inadmissible. So that's just in the last 3.5 years. But let's be very honest. In December, this past December, we were averaging 10 to 12,000 illegal entries every day. Now they've done some finagling, they've made some fuzzy math problems, and they've kind of changed the way they allow people to come in and what they're doing. So the numbers have dropped to around 1,800 to 2,000 a day at the border being arrested by Border Patrol. But one more thing I want to add to that. Jay Johnson, who was President Obama and Vice President Biden's DHS secretary during the last term, said 1,000 a day would be a crisis. He wouldn't know what 2,000 or 3,000 a day would be. That is Obama Biden's secretary. And yet we've been dealing with that number for over 3.5 years. Anywhere from 1,800 to 10,000 a day have come across under this administration.
Chris, let me ask you this. Vice President Harris referred to in the latest debate, she said, we had a plan. We had a plan. It was going to make the border more secure, Jimmy Jam, all that stuff. Trump called up his Republican buddies. They killed it. I took all along that bill was a poison pill. Exactly why did that bill fail, and what was actually in it?
Well, let me speak to some cold hard facts here. We did have a plan. It was President Trump's implementation of the border security national strategy, and they were hand delivered and told not to mess this up or this would happen. They ruined the plan by stopping it on day one. That's a matter of fact. 94 executive actions directly and indirectly, just torpedoed everything they've been working for. But to your point in the debate, she's referring to that bipartisan Senate bill. And it was a poison pill because it had nothing to do with actually securing the border. It had to do with migrant facilitation. It had to do with bringing more resources to process people quickly. It had to do with, the asylum judges being down there to kind of, get people a hearing quicker, which isn't necessarily bad, but nothing was stopping people from coming across the border. Of course, they added all that other pork and funding to other border security operations around the world, like Ukraine and places like that. But as far as securing the border, there was no resources that said we're going to finish shoring up the security apparatus that was put in place. There was an increase in some Border Patrol agents, but we had asked for 3,000 in 23. We got 300. So they did not do anything to make it a stronger border. It was about funding non-government organizations. It was about facilitating the processing of people in the country quicker. It did add some detention space so we could have a little more capacity to detain people. But let me remind you, that's the level that they started with. They cut detention space in half. So they were just bringing it back to Trump level. So where I get very upset about when I hear that bipartisan bill, it never passed the Senate, first of all.
Right.
So it was dead on arrival anyway. Right. But they had a House bill, H.R. 2, passed by the House, sent to Chuck Schumer in the Senate, and it's been sitting there for almost 20 months. The first 4 or 5 sections of that bill said, we're going to finish building the wall, the infrastructure plan. We're going to put the policies back in place that gave consequences and closed loopholes. We're going to add more border patrons, more technology, and we're going to add more detention space. That was all it was about securing the border. The bipartisan deal, they claim, was weak, and it did not address the security piece. And again, political trade-offs. We're going to bring in more people. We're going to put magic numbers in there. That's another thing that people need to dissect. This president and this vice president said they didn't have the authority to do things, but they have used their authority to unravel everything and put their own plan in place. And that bill codified a magic number that sent a signal to the cartels of how many people they could move through and continue to profit without drawing the ire of the U.S. government. And that's another reason why that bill was terrible and dead on arrival.
We want to come back and want to finish our conversation with Chris Clem. If you want to see his official website, because I know a lot of you are saying, man, I want access to what he knows, it's chrisclemofficial.com. We'll continue our conversation when Rick and Bubba University, the podcast, continues right after this.
This is the Rick and Bubba Show. Watch more at blazetv.com/Rick and Bubba.
Rick and Bubba, Rick and Bubba.
Our guest on this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast, is Chris Clem, a former U.S. Border Patrol chief, 27 and a half years of experience, retired about 19 months ago. So he does know what he's talking about. We were talking about the so-called bipartisan bill that you said was not bipartisan, and yes, it had all the problems, Bubba, that you feared. The other part, and you were just getting on it, but I want to get a little more clarity. True or false, Biden and Harris, the executive office, could they use executive power for an executive action or an order right now that would secure the border?
Yes, I mean, they absolutely have the authority, and that was granted to them through Congress. We need the president of the United States to be able to have that authority to protect Americans. There are laws in place that can shut things down that, the media sensationalized, calls them travel bans and all this stuff. It is actually an authority for the president of the United States to protect America, to allow 0 people to enter this country, that we can remove people immediately. We can detain people that have crossed illegally indefinitely until we can get things under control. These are powers that are vested with the White House that they could use. Now, use them judiciously. We used them after 9/11 because we didn't know where all the threats were. And we can do it anytime there's a threat to the homeland. So when you see things going on around the world, when you know that the cartels and the terrorist organizations are working hand in hand on our southern border, there are powers in place that the White House could use. All that other stuff was just media sensationalizing and talking, because, again, the president had 94 executive orders that he started on day one of his administration, directly and indirectly unraveling everything that was put in place under the previous administration. In fact, there are video clips out there of DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas laughing about, like, there's just too many of Trump's policies that we've undone that to mention. And yet they want to blame everybody else but themselves. Let me tell you, the borders are addressing the root cause. The root cause is the White House.
Chris, let's talk about this too, because we saw in the debate, Trump said, "Hey, let's drive down to D.C. right now. Get your boss." He made the joke, wake him up, and we can sign papers right now to end this. I find it very unusual the way that the vice president is having to run this campaign by blaming things that are done that she wants to fix when she was actually part of the cause of it. It really must be tough to communicate that. I think that's one reason they don't want her doing very many interviews, because she's fighting a paper tiger that has her picture on it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, let's go back to when she was a district attorney and attorney general. We had horrible crimes. Kate Steinle was murdered by an undocumented alien that had a firearm. He was ultimately acquitted of those charges and was convicted of alien in possession of a gun. She talks a tough game. She was the attorney general when that happened. Then she, as a senator, she has tried to defund ICE, which is our interior enforcement and detention apparatus when it comes down to border security. Talked about defunding ICE, reimagine or reimage ICE. Claimed that they were the KKK in a Senate hearing. She has bragged about defunding police and supporting bailouts of rioters. And then as the vice president, she championed the lie about the horse patrol incident down in Del Rio, Texas, saying that they were whipping and strapping migrants, and continues to blast everything that we've done as a border security agency. And yet Now she's going to fix it. Now she has a plan. Do you really think these Tigers are going to be able to change their stripes when she gets elected? No, this is just campaign speak that we've known to come by certain members of the Democratic Party when the elections are on the line. Again, they didn't take this serious until December of last year, when the numbers coming across the border were through the roof, and the polling numbers tanked the Biden Harris administration when it came down to border security. And all of a sudden, they got serious. They waited 6 months out from an election rather than doing this within the first 90 days of this administration. Chris,
it's hard, I think, for just average people that go to work every day to imagine why this is happening. Is it as sinister as what some of us feel that it may be, that the Democrats are basically flooding the country, especially Texas, to turn it blue or purple at best, so that they can have a class of people who is going to need government handouts and they can count on them as votes?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, and we will never get a straight answer from Washington on that. So, our brain is geared to reason and make sense of facts or information, and that's the only logical way to make sense of what has happened, because no other country on this planet would allow this type of irregular, illegal immigration to occur. And we know there are some facts there that under President Trump, the census counting, you had to be a U.S. citizen. That was done away with. So, at least that makes some sense. I don't have to like it. I mean, I'd rather, but I've got to find some way to say, why would anybody do this? Because the people that are coming in are not all being persecuted and tortured. They're economic migrants. They're and so that's why they keep coming here, because they're being given handouts and opportunities that most people don't get. And so, I think that this administration, today's Democratic Party, are looking for servants over citizens. And this is a way that they could take a red state and maybe make it purple in hopes to turn it blue one day, make a purple state blue so they can gain power, or flood a blue state so they can get more representatives, because that's what those census numbers, that's what those type of polling show. And I mean, look, if that's the case, at least we know how we plan for battle to fix this. But because there's no other real reason. If I knew that if I could with a straight face tell you 99% of the people that we've encountered are truly asylum seekers and are being persecuted for a protected class or political affiliation, but that is not the case. It's less than 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
So why is this happening? And it's just displacing people. It's making it harder for Americans to find jobs. And we know that the American labor force has been challenged over the last few years. So we're just making it that more difficult and creating a larger government dole for people. And I think that's what they want, because if the government can get more control, then people are going to have to hang on. And that's not a republic. That's not the way our Constitution reads. We need less government. We need our government just to protect us and not control us.
Gosh, when you give, because that was the next question, but you answered it, what percentage are asylum seekers that are looking for a better life and for protection? You said what, 5 to 10%?
Yeah, when I was chief in Yuma, we apprehended the first year I was there. We went from 8,800 to over 116,000, and then to 312,000, which is crazy numbers just for one little section of our border. People didn't ask for asylum. They didn't seek it when they were in. It was actually when they were told they were going to be processed for removal, and if they claimed fear of returning to their home country, would they actually claim that as a defense? But there was no one seeking an affirmative asylum claim. And out of that group, maybe 5 to 10%. So out of 100,000, you're talking 10,000 may have had some kind of level of fear and persecution. Most of them just said, hey, there's no jobs where I'm at, or it's a rough neighborhood. Well, that's Chicago. So we just can't be that. We want to be that beacon of hope for those that are coming here for the right reasons. And we want to protect those that are truly being persecuted for religious and whatever, it's kind of like our EEO laws that we have. That's the same kind of bar for asylum seekers. But that is just a narrative that got taken over. They're economic migrants looking for work, looking to benefit. And there's a whole class of them that are single adult men, 18 to 35 with no family. That doesn't look like someone seeking asylum to me. That looks like somebody, coming to cause problems.
Well, the tough truth of what you and Bubba were just discussing, and we've asked this question every time when it comes to the border. You have more expertise than anyone we talked to so far. So if we're talking 5 to 10% are the stories that have helped make America great, that can be handled through legal immigration, and we can certainly tweak that if we need to. Back to the Fred Thompson comment, which is a great one. So if we're to the point that 90 to 95% of them are either coming here because they think they just look for work, or worse, they have a criminal element. What we're hearing from the Democratic Party, and I don't want to over-dramatize this, it just seems pretty straightforward. If your loved one was killed by an illegal who was coming here as part of a cartel, a gang, fill in the blank, infiltrating the country for some reason that involves terrorism, and you lost a loved one because of that, and we know those cases absolutely exist, well, I'm sorry, you were just expendable, because ultimately we want to be in power, and we want to keep power, and we want to increase our power. Sorry that your loved one got killed. To us, it's worth it. That's what you're hearing from the left.
Well, that's kind of, you're right on. I mean, because you're not hearing any. They don't talk it. They don't mention names publicly. They don't mention Lake and Riley or Rachel Moore or Jocelyn or all the other ones that have happened. Right. It's a sad state of affairs, because their first response is this. Well, American citizens commit more crimes than migrants. You see, they immediately go to migrants. Mm-hmm. Okay. They don't talk about illegal aliens that entered illegally and they were released. See, they shouldn't even be factored into the equation, because they're not even supposed to be here. So it's not apples and oranges. It's apples and rocks. They're not even related.
Right.
These are people that should have been arrested and detained and removed, not arrested, detained, and released, because those are the ones, that's what angers Americans. We get it. People that are coming here as lawful migrants that are assimilating and are trying to work, they do commit a lower percentage of crime. I mean, that's a number. We've seen that number in FBI statistics. What we're talking about, those that entered illegally, are inadmissible and have been released, and now they're in major cities across the country, and they're committing crime. And that's where our tolerance level has said enough is enough. And that's where people will not tolerate that. And the left specifically, they try to blend that and normalize, like, well, and they broad brush all migrants, saying, oh, well, you're just classifying and lumping all migrants. No, we're talking about those that entered illegally, that were caught and released by this administration, who are now going in there and creating havoc, chaos, and these heinous crimes and murdering American citizens. And that is completely unacceptable. And the fact that the White House doesn't stand strong on that, shame on them.
We'll be back more with our conversation with Chris Clem when Rick and Bubba University. The podcast continues after this.
This is the Rick and Bubba Show. Watch more at blazetv.com/Rick and Bubba.
Rick and Bubba, Rick and Bubba.
Welcome back, Rick and Bubba University. Chris Clem is our guest, former U.S. Border Patrol Chief, 27 and a half years of experience talking about this problem with our open southern border.
Chris, what about agent morale? I can't imagine, the battle that these guys that are out there, in the dirt, wearing the boots, tracking these folks down, and to have these wild shifts in administrative support, it has to just really take its toll.
It does. It does take its toll. And esprit de corps has been something that is part of any service and mission-driven organization, whether it's your local police department, any of our military branches, but certainly part of the U.S. Border Patrol. And the men and women out there are doing a great job when they can do their job. And the huge paradigm shift of what we experienced under President Trump to President Biden, we didn't want to get into the political spotlight. What we've been drug in there the last few administrations. And so we appreciate the positive attention, and no one likes the negative attention. But when we saw what took place under the transition of from Trump to Biden. And what we thought was maybe an ineptitude and maybe a few campaign promises turned into, this is purposeful, and this is happening right here. And we went from being championed and called heroes under the Trump administration to really demonized and vilified from the campaign and into this current administration. And I'll give you some examples that really, one big one that just still sits in my craw was September of 2021. What was happening in Del Rio, Texas, when we had 16,000 people show up in a couple of days, mainly Haitian nationals, and they were creating all sorts of chaos and violence down there. And there was the Horse Patrol that was trying to keep law and order, and that image that of an agent on horseback using the split reins to control the horse, cowboy hat, chaps, the water splash, and the guy was running, and the president, the vice president, the secretary, and the media all said that they were whipping and strapping those agents, or the agents were doing that to that migrant. And even the president made that comment that evening and made the motion of strapping those people, and they will pay. I was 1,000 miles away in Yuma, Arizona. I wanted to throw up. I couldn't believe that the president of the United States just did that, knowing it was a lie, knowing that the person that took the photograph said, no, there was no whips. Nobody whipped anybody. It was a great photo. The pain that the agents had to deal with, knowing that the commander in chief just vilified an entire organization, and especially those agents on horseback, there was an opportunity for them to deflect from the failure that over 16,000 people were sitting under that bridge and coming across that river in a 3-day period. That tanked the morale. I mean, we were trending low, and it just went to the bottom of the barrel. And we fought as leaders, did everything we could to try to change policy. It wasn't going to happen, and it just continued to spiral. We had a rash of suicides across the Border Patrol. I think there was 14 of them in 2022. And I won't blame the president's border crisis on the suicides, but I will say this: it's a contributing factor, because we know through behavior science and suicide experts that when people don't feel valued, when they lose their purpose, when they're dealing with issues, whether it's home life, financial, addiction, and they come to work to find some purpose, and that purpose has been taken away, they end up taking their lives. And we saw that. And I've done everything I can, at least when I was chief. I brought in experts, had mental health days. I shifted some priority training money to make sure we got people there, because we still had a job to do. But I wanted people to know that it was okay to talk about it if they were dealing with problems, because I would much rather carry your problems than carry your casket. And that was kind of the message we wanted to send to our agents is, hey, we're going to still do our job. And we're gonna find ways to be successful, regardless if this administration's helping us or not. But we need you. We love you. We support you. And I brought in former NFL players down the border to speak to our agents, to thank them. We just did a lot. And again, it's not just Border Patrol. Our military have suffered under this administration. Our local law enforcement, our state law enforcement have suffered.
Oh yeah.
So we've got to continue to champion our men and women, because in your time of need, in this country's time of need, we need people to have their head on straight, and they need to be focused on answering that 911 call and not being distracted because they don't feel supported by their leadership. And so, I know that this audience, and I'm preaching the choir, but thank your law enforcement, thank your military, support them and encourage them to continue to do that job, because we need them.
Let's talk human trafficking. It's one of the things that none of us like to think about. I mean, you just don't like to think about it.
No.
But it is a horrible thing. We've talked to people that they're on the front lines like you guys. They see it firsthand. Some that after it's already taken place, we've got to interview that go and praise God for them and rescue people. But like you said, that'll be the second phase of everything that needs to be done. The open border is just a gift. I can't think of a better word, unfortunately, for human trafficking.
Yeah, people don't want to talk about that, but The slave trade has been going on for centuries, right? And that's kind of what it is. It's indentured servitude. It's when people cannot get out of a situation that they did not know they were getting in. I mean, most victims of trafficking, whether it's sex trafficking, whether it's indentured servitude, indebtedness, things like that, they don't realize they're victims until it's too late. And everybody that comes into the United States through Mexico, through our southern border, has had some kind of subjection to the cartel, who is really a transnational criminal organization. Their tentacles spread around the world. Even people that are trying to get in line in commercial trucking to come in through our ports of entry end up paying some bribes. I say that because the people, the 10 million that have crossed illegally, are paying money to the cartel, and some people don't have the money that they have to pay. And so they're going to have to work that off. That becomes trafficking. And, we don't want to talk about it. It turns our stomach, but that involves violence, assault, rape, prostitution, drug abuse, all that stuff. It's happening. Organ harvesting. That is happening down there in places like Mexico. And these people are discarded. They're not saving their lives. It's all about profiting. It's all about making money for these cartels. And our policies that encourage people to come over here because we're going to give them those multiple bites at the apple are actually putting people in harm's way. Yeah. We need to send a very clear message that we will not allow you to come in illegal. You will not go through those channels. There is a right way to come through. And doing that would actually, it's not going to end it because unfortunately there's evil out there, but it actually should mitigate some people from getting put into harm's way. I know we're going to go there, so I'm just going to jump in. There's a report that came out of 320,000 missing children in the United States. Border Patrol agents arrest unaccompanied minors. They are a priority. Within 72 hours, they are processed and placed with Health and Human Services, Office of Refugee Resettlement. It is their job to reunite them with family members of the United States or place them with sponsors. Within usually a week to them being placed with a sponsor or family member, they follow up with a phone call to make sure that little Johnny is okay. To my knowledge, understand that report, over 320,000 people were never accounted for. We don't know if little Johnny is reunited or is being tortured or is dead. And that is a failure. That is a failure on the left, the right, and people down the middle. These are children that got caught up in this nonsense. And if nothing less, we have to protect those children and make sure that we prevent this from happening altogether.
It just seems
mind-boggling, isn't it?
Well, and it seems so
why it's continuing.
Yeah, and it seems so elementary. I mean, I know we've all used this analogy, but it's accurate. I mean, the whole reason why that we vet people over anything is because I don't know if you're coming up to my house. I don't know whether you're a kind person that just would like to ask me for a cup of sugar, or ask for directions, or I don't know whether you intend to come into my home and rob me, whether you come into my home to kill me. Maybe you're just trying to give me a gospel tract. I don't know. That's the reason why we have these ways to vet people out, because not everyone means good. Why can't we just wrap our minds around that exact same truth when it comes to this glaring issue of this open southern border? It just boggles the mind.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, you just have a certain mainstream media, mainly a lot of our Democrats that talk in platitudes, right? They don't want to address the problem. They just want to, push the problem over and blame somebody else. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, it's football season. Go try and just jump in the front of a line of an Alabama game and say they don't have tickets. Say, hey, I just want to go ahead and get 50-yard line. See what's going to happen there. Or you jump right in front of at Arrowhead Stadium, the defending Kansas City Chiefs. Go jump in front of the line and say, no, I want 50-yard line. You would be front page news, escort out in handcuffs. Right. But you jump in front of the line here. You sneak across the border here. You move children here, and we turn around and say, well, they're probably doing something. They're they're trying to get a better life. Well, look, we all want a better life, but there is a right way and a wrong way to do things in this country, and it's called the rule of law. And and especially when we look at this country and what our founding principles are, in God we trust. Well, look, in heaven there's a big vetting system before you get in there. So we have been talking about this for too long. We need to get it fixed. We need to make sure that we will welcome people here that want to come the right way, that want to contribute to making America better, that want to contribute to the founding principles of this country. But if you're not going to contribute, if you're an evildoer, if you're associated with bad things, we have a right to not let you in. There is no free pass. And we have our own problems here. And the last thing I'll say on this why we can't get it fixed, and it frustrates me to no end. I am not a veteran. I went straight out of school and went right into the Border Patrol. But we have homeless and hungry veterans. Yep. We have 22 suicides a day by veterans. We have hungry and homeless children in the United States here. We have got to prioritize those people who have protected our country, who put their lives on the line, and children who don't often have a voice or have that protection. We've got to get that right here before we welcome in 10 million new people. That is ridiculous. That is where our focus should be. Protect this country and protect those that protected us and those that are from this country that don't have a voice or the protection. That is where we see this complete system breakdown of our government, because they're looking for votes and they're looking to blame the other side when it's glaring right there in front of their face. They need to get it right, and we don't need to be bringing in more people. Charity starts at home. Let's fix that problem, and then we can worry about helping others around the world.
We'll come back and finish our conversation with Chris Clem when Rick and Bubba University, the podcast, continues right after this.
This is the Rick and Bubba Show. Watch more at blazetv.com/Rick and Bubba.
Rick and Bubba, Rick and Bubba.
Our guest is Chris Clem on this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast. If you want to go to his official website, and there's so much information from his expertise, chrisclemofficial.com. So we just have a few more minutes with you.
Chris, I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
No matter who goes in to be president, and they say, Chris, come here, tell me what we need to do to fix this border. What steps can we do to make the most corrections to this as quickly as possible? I assume it would be more likely Trump. But we'll just play the game here for a minute. Let's just say whoever it is. What would you tell them? And what could we do to fix this problem immediately? And what would we do about the people who are already here?
Yeah, great question. And if I got the phone call, I would tell them, first of all, let's finish what we started. Let's not conflate immigration and border security. Let's focus on the security piece. The requirements that are needed for Border Patrol agents to do their job. It is a wall where it makes sense. Finish what we had planned. We don't really need a 2,000-mile wall from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean, but where the agents need it, where people can disappear within seconds to minutes, we need to finish what we started, to include the technology, access roads. There are places where we can't even get to the border because Mother Nature will wash those roads out during a storm, so we need the all-weather access roads. We need to put policies and consequences back in place. They don't really like remain in Mexico, but it worked because it closed asylum loopholes. We don't have to have that indefinitely, but we can use that policy to slow down the flow that's arriving here so we can get a handle on the border. And then definitely, we need to make sure that we are, going after people that are exploiting our system and exploiting people. So I would finish what we started where it makes sense. Every chief across the southwest border has a plan, ready to dust it off and update it, ready to go for the new administration. Get that underway. Put the policies back in place that we know that worked until we can create better policies and build off of that. None of these, let's not make perfect the enemy of good. These were good, strong policies that could have been more fine-tuned under this administration had they left the security piece in place. So that's what I would do initially, because we've got to patch the leak in the boat and not just try to bail out water. So once we get the leak stopped, then focus on bailing out that water. And we've heard President Trump talk about mass deportation. And it's going to be a logistical nightmare, but we can strategically start addressing issues like those that have been deported and removed in absentia, never showed up to their due process, and a judge ordered them removed. We can go find them and remove them. We know there's a large percentage of criminal aliens out there. Let's go get the ag felons. Let's go get the felons that are out there that are non-citizens, and let's remove them. And then we can slow down that roll of those that have been paroled in here, because the executive controls the parole process. So they're allowing people to come in and there's no end date. Let's end that, and let's get those people out. That would remove a good portion of those that have entered illegally over the last few years, and kind of clear the clutter, so we can go after the traffickers and then go rescue those victims of trafficking. That could be done because every law enforcement out there on these streets across the country know where these pockets of people exist, and we just get the cooperation from the state and locals, backed by the power of the Fed, and we can actually make some difference.
Bubba mentioned the morale. Would part of that too? What's the numbers look like? Do we need more agents? I mean, obviously, you would think we would, and as long as morale is down, or they don't feel like they're going to be supported by the executive branch, I guess that why a lot of people certainly feel called, and they do it because they're called. But those that go, well, I'll go, but I'm not going to go in this atmosphere. The election, I would think, would help that too.
Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind if the Trump administration if Trump was to win and he was back in office, you would have a large the recruitment and retention of law enforcement, not just Border Patrol, but law enforcement in general would go up, because we're all fishing from the same pond right now, whether it's military, state, local, or federal. And it's a very, very small pond, because just the rhetoric and the vitriol that's been going after police for the last 4 or 5 years. So we would need that. And there's about a little over 18,000 Border Patrol agents to cover the southwest border, the coast, and the northern border. To give you some perspective, there's over 34,000 or close to 40,000 sworn NYPD officers. So we need somewhere between 23 to 25,000 Border Patrol agents to do this and do this job correctly. We asked for those numbers back in the 23 budget, and Biden only gave us 300. Not the 3,000 plus we were looking for. So I have no doubt that a Trump administration would increase the recruiting and increase the retention, so people don't retire early. Like somebody like me, I had 5 years to go, but I wasn't gonna cross and ruin my integrity and put up with this nonsense of this administration. I've been living away from home for 9 of the last 10 years of my career, and it was an opportunity to be back with my family and not put up with the nonsense coming out of Washington.
That was my question, and I'm glad you answered it, because I thought maybe I shouldn't ask it. Did your retirement have anything to do with the situation? And you made that pretty clear. It did, didn't it? So you had 5 years.
I was very proud of everything I accomplished. I started off as a GS5 Border Patrol agent and promoted through the ranks and in different positions into the senior executive service. I was not a political appointee. I was somebody that was a career senior executive. But I still had 5 years to go till I had mandatory retirement. And, again, I've been away from my wife and kids for the last 9 of the 10 years, not living at home, coming home on the weekends or every few months. It takes its toll. And when I realized that the first 2 years of this administration, it was not going to get any better. And I was kind of the last of those chiefs that was, I knew where that line of insubordination was. I'd get as close to it as possible, because the facts matter to the community. The facts matter to our agents, and the facts matter to the American people. And I was not going to be subject to their narrative. I like to say they were more about securing their narrative than securing the border. They had it backwards. I was about securing the border and taking care of our agents. And we weren't getting that out of Washington. I said, you know what? I'm going to have a big target on my back if I stick around. My time is done. There's another platform and opportunity out there. And, for example, right here today, there's an opportunity to tell the truth. Everything I've said is factual and through the eyes of somebody that did this job and wore the uniform for 27 and a half years.
Well, you're right. I thought about that on your retirement. I mean, if you were still continuing on, you would not have the ability and the freedom, my goodness, because the day would be full, for you to go out and take time to now be an advocate for the Border Patrol agents, but also to be someone who says to the American citizens, Here's what's actually going on. I've been there. I've done it. Not a long time ago, recently, and I can tell you this is the problem, and you just told us on this podcast, and here is the solution. And I think we should all inform ourselves, and when our opportunity comes to vote, there is, in our opinion, a pretty clear choice. That game plan you laid out would just have to pick back up and be completed if Trump wins. If he doesn't, then we're going to have to convince a bunch that doesn't seem to be willing to do something that they've shown no evidence that they would be desire to do at all. So thank you, Chris Clem, for being with us, and I know you've got to get to another appointment. ChrisClemOfficial.com is the website. Thank you, Chris, and thanks to each and every one of you for being with us on this edition of Rick and Bubba University, the podcast.